All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for Oregon versus Georgia. This one will take place in Week 1 in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. 17.5-point line in favor of Georgia. The over-under is 51. This one will be on ABC, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And the only matchup between these two in history was a UGA victory back in 1977. Looking at this Oregon offense, Kenny Dillingham reunites with Bo Nix. I've never been a big fan of the player, but I've always been a big fan of the talent. It's just rare when we see it for a full 4 quarters, let alone a full year. He's shown impressive abilities as a runner, though, that can make plays out of the pocket. He's coming off a career best in terms of yards per game and yards per attempt, 229 and 7.1 respectively. Nix has just struggled with consistency. Takes a lot of sacks, sometimes tries to do too much downfield. Accuracy will waver at times. It's been just a very strange career for Bo Nix. Interesting player. He's going to face Georgia again. This is a familiar opponent. He saw all 3 years there at Auburn. Him and Dillingham, though, they reunite. And I thought he had a really great year. Auburn, that was their highest points per game mark over the last couple of seasons when Dillingham was there. Under Nix's tenure, rather, that was their most points per game. So these two reuniting, I think it can lead to some special things. They lose plenty of skill at running back. They have, a quality trio of Byron Cardwell, nearly 7 yards per carry, 400-plus yards. Last year, nearly all of that came over the back half of the season. Pretty good slasher for being 210 pounds. I like Sean Dollars. He stuck around and waited his turn. He's quick and elusively. This is his 3rd year now. Seven McGee, he announced he was coming back. Earlier in the offseason, he was going to transfer, I believe, originally. Got a handful of touches in a few different facets, but I believe he's moving to a wide receiver full-time. Athletic specimen there, I like McGee. Noah Whittington, though, from Western Kentucky, averaged 51 yards per game on 8 touches per game. 600-plus yards on the year for that air raid offense. He was a very reliable back when they needed him. I think the biggest key here for Oregon is the offensive line. Obviously, Mario Cristobal's bunch, him and Alex Marable, they're gone. But those guys were offensive line gurus, and these guys were just getting bodied in the trenches late in the year against Utah in those 2 games. They looked the exact same in both contests. But, they have the personnel. They're plenty capable. TJ Bass, he moved him to tackle, and he still shined. Might pivot back inside, it appears. He's a great run blocker. Alex Forsythe, another veteran here at center, like Stephen Jones. He's at tackle. He's been around a bit as well. Again, they got pushed around against Utah. For the course of the season, though, this was a great offensive line. Had a field day against Ohio State early on in the year. They'll have to control the interior D-line of Georgia. It is a young group for the Bulldogs that replaces a lot. This is a winnable matchup, though, I'd say, if they can play up to their potential. They'll have to deal with Jalen Carter, though. He's tough. Obviously, these guys are physical. They're big. They're nasty. So that's obviously going to be a very big matchup, a very crucial part of this game. Oregon wide receiver room was really talented last year. They lose 5 good pass catchers, including Travis Dye. He, led the team in receptions last year. Passing game really struggled. Anthony Brown didn't exactly perform the way I thought he would. Ty Thompson, I guess he did not play well in practice because they never put him in. No matter how bad Brown struggled, they refused to put him in outside of a blowout over Stony Brook last year. Chris Hudson, though, 5'11", 168, speedy playmaker, quietly ranked 2nd on the team in yards. He's their top returning pass catcher. Troy Franklin, very similar size. Deontay Thornton, 6'5", 200, looking to get these 2 more involved. These guys were all pretty high-ranked recruits, though, in their respective classes. And, Oregon, a lot of leftover talent here, especially at wide receiver. And I like Chase Cota from UCLA, 67 grabs, 900 yards in his 4 years at UCLA. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. 7 games or less in 3 of his 4 seasons with the Bruins. He's going to come over here as, a respectable contributor in his career. Overall, this is a pretty sound Oregon offense. We'll see what Bo Nix can do. We'll see if he can click, if he, can avoid turning the ball over. They'll have a chance in this game. I think they're going to have to set the tone, though, on the offensive line because they're plenty capable of doing so. They didn't prove it last year against Utah, which was disappointing. It's going to be an even tougher matchup here. But, again, they are capable, and I expect them to play pretty well. But is that going to lead to success on offense? It remains to be seen. Like on the Georgia offense, Stetson Bennett, he has gotten a lot better at diagnosing defenses, his decision-making. Had a great 4th quarter there. He showed the ability to bounce back against Alabama in that quarter, where he had a bad fumble, and then right after he had 2 touchdowns. He was flawless the rest of the quarter. 2,800-plus yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. That's 204 yards per game. I always call him an above-average game manager. Seems to fit this offensive style really well. Todd Monk, and he's still here, so they have obviously some continuity here. I think they'll lack the same explosiveness in the backfield just because James Cook departs. Kenny McIntosh, a good pass catcher, to make plays on the outside. He hits the hole in a hurry as well. I like him and Milton. Kendall Milton, that is slightly bigger at 220. He's more muscular of the two, does a lot more work as an inside runner, pretty strong and physical. I think Branson Robinson, he's a big, thick back that fits the scheme well. He should get a nice workload this season. Maybe we'll see him get involved a good bit. 191 rush yards per game last season. That They were only 7th in the conference in carries, though. They didn't run it that much, but when they did, they were the model of consistency on the ground. 191 yards per game. It's not the greatest numbers. It's a really impressive mark, but they could have had a lot more if they wanted to. They're pretty conservative for the most part. Interesting to see how they adjust, though, to no James Cook. He was used a lot in 5 wide receiver sets to generate matchups. They no longer have that threat, and they're facing a pretty talented linebacking and secondary group of Oregon. So I want to see what they can do without James Cook. Speed in the backfield's gone as well. So big changes here. Obviously it's just one player, and it's a running back at that. But I think it's a big loss for them. They don't lose much in the receiving core. Jermaine Burton transfers to Bama. George Pickens to the NFL. They lack size at wide receiver. They're not very big. Kyrus Jackson, Ladd McConkey, they're both 6 foot tall and under 200 pounds. A.D. Mitchell as well, but he's 6'4". So, a variety of skills throughout these pass catchers, though. I think that's what makes them so good, and that's why they have some solid production between all of them. Arian Smith, he has elite speed. He only had 3 catches last year for 102 yards and 2 scores. That's pretty impressive stuff. He wasn't healthy one bit, though. Eric Gilbert, 6'5", 248. They're going to move him to wide receiver, I believe. Regardless, he's another versatile guy they like to use. The size at tight end, on the other hand, is very impressive. Brock Bowers, 6'4", 230. Darnell Washington, he's like 6'7", 250. 17 receptions in the first 2 years. Washington, 6'7", 265, rather. The only touchdown in his career came against Alabama on a jump ball in the red zone. I want to see more of that. They need to get him more involved this season. I think it's going to be a big breakout year for Washington. 58 grabs, 882 yards, and 13 touchdowns for Bowers his debut season. UGA loves that bubble screen, that jailbreak screen. I expect to see that with Bowers and Arian Smith a good bit, and it will be successful as it always is. Every time they seem to call that, they run it for a first down, and Smith, his speed, with probably Bowers out there blocking, maybe Washington on the edge as well. It's going to be pretty unguardable, I'd say, so that's going to be something to watch, not just in this game, but this season. The offensive line remains largely intact. That's why the run game this year might even be better despite the losses of their top 2 backs. They lose 2 big movers on the left side, but, Broderick Jones, he's going to take over at left tackle, a long-armed guy, good athlete. Marius Mims at left guard. Cedric Van Pran, he was one of the only penciled-in starters there on the inside coming into the season, or into the spring, rather. The offensive line, though, features 4 redshirt sophomore or younger. Warren McClendon, a 4th-year player, right tackle. These guys are pretty young on this unit, which is kind of scary because they were really good last season, and now they have all this youth that's going to continue to grow. So I think overall this Georgia offense, they're great. They have nice balance. They don't really blow you away with too many statistics, but from a consistency standpoint and finding the end zone, that's exactly what they do. They complement their tough defensive style very well. And I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think they should be able to run the ball quite well, but I'm really very interested to see which receiver kind of steps up and kind of emerges as the number 1 guy, because right now it's a variety of different guys, which is great. But I would also like to see some more leadership at wide receiver as well. Looking at this Oregon defense, they allowed 27 points per game a season ago. Pass rush was quite weak. Even with Kayvon Thibodeau, this team only had 23 sacks. Braden Swinson started the year with 2 sacks in 2 games, only had 1 the rest of the season. He was an impact player early, missed 3 games. He just wasn't the same when he came back. I do like the interior D-line, DJ Johnson, Brandon Dorless here at defensive tackle. Dorless had 7 tackles for loss last year. Dan Lennon comes from a team that had nothing but heat on the D-line, that being the Bulldogs. But, this is a watered-down group. It wasn't exactly great a season ago. Not so much on the interior, but in terms of pass rushing unit, yes. The run defense was quite good until the final 4 games where the wheels just completely fell off. Utah being 2 of those games. Jason Jones departs for Auburn. Keon Ware-Hudson and Popo Amuavavi, these guys are really good. The interior D-line is a pretty strong starting point, but getting to the QB is a concern. I do think Mace Funa is going to come off the edge a little bit this year. One of the more experienced players on this roster. They're going to look to him to generate some pass rushing production. But right now I'm not very keen on the depth they have, and I think that might be a concern. Not just in this game, but throughout the year. Great group of linebackers, though. Justin Flo, only 1 game in 2 years. He had 14 tackles against Fresno State in his debut last year. Showcased his sideline-to-sideline abilities. Noah Sewell, one of the nation's best, 114 tackles, 8.5 TFL, 2 forced fumbles. Great athletic abilities for his size. Was a great blitzer last year. Got home 4 times. That was ranking him 2nd on the team in sacks, which, that's good, but at the same time it's kind of bad. But they like to send him after the quarterback, and something you're going to see a lot in this game. Very interested to see the blitz packages Dan Lanning rolls out with Sewell at the helm. Keith Brown, he's also on the roster here if they need him. At linebacker. Secondary wasn't great last year. They ranked 89th against the pass, ranked towards the bottom of the Pac-12 in touchdowns allowed, but they did snag 17 interceptions, which led the conference. They had a game-sealing interception against Ohio State as well. They do lose a few starters, but they returned Bennett Williams. He was their top playmaker early on in the year. He had 3 picks and 21 tackles in only 5 games before breaking his leg. I'm pretty sure he's the one that picked off C.J. Stroud to seal the deal in Columbus. Bennett Williams, though, he was phenomenal. His safety spot, Jamal Hill, has been good in coverage. Very impressive slot corner for him. It's a pretty deep safety room. Very interested to see what Jeffrey Bassett does in his second year. Had almost 50 tackles as a freshman a season ago. Add Christian Gonzalez, a nice a rangy corner from Colorado, shined over the past 2 seasons. Great size, 6'2", 200. He can stop the run. His speed, they run with some fast wide receivers. They're probably going to pair him up with Arian Smith. He's got some good ball skills, too. Very impressive players. Christian Gonzalez, Dante Manning, he's a former linebacker with size and play recognition. They want to get him on the field a good bit, help improve that run defense. I think that's really going to be a very important part of their game this Saturday. Dante Manning and Christian Gonzalez, I think they're going to use these guys a lot on the edge to try and crack down on this run a good bit. I do like 6'3", Triquez Bridges. He's got some good length as well. So they have a very talented secondary. In terms of this game, though, they're going to have to match Georgia's physicality. That's really where it's going to start, and that's probably where it's going to end as well. Like I said, I think they'll get Gonzalez and Manning involved to try and slow down the run. I like the interior D-line's depth, so I think that if they can step up and make plays there, then they'll probably have a good shot in this game. I don't expect much pass rush, though. I do think those linebackers in coverage, those guys are going to be, on Brock Bowers, on those running backs. It's going to be a very interesting matchup to see, and I think they're pretty favorable for them as well. I do think Georgia still has the edge, but they don't slouch at all with this Oregon defense. Looking at the Bulldog defense, last year they had one of the greatest units of all time. Now they replace almost everybody in their front seven. I was a little concerned with this unit as, over the last 2 years. They only had 2 guys ranked inside the top 20 at the position. They do have 3 incoming true freshmen ranked inside the top 15 at defensive tackle, Michael Williams being one of them. But I'm always hesitant, on true freshmen, what role they'll play and how fast they can adjust. I think Barry Alexander being 6'3", 325, he might be a big impact freshman for them this season. Jalen Carter, though, he was the best at times on this defensive line, which is saying a lot considering how much talent they had. He's explosive, very nimble on his feet, a powerful guy. I think he's the top DT in college football, moves very well. Nazir Stackhouse, 6'3", 320, Zion Logue, 6'5", 295, Warren Brinson as well. This group is really up for grabs, and I think that's the biggest thing to watch in this game. So who's going to really step up, who's going to emerge at defensive tackle and pencil themselves in as starters? I'm not sure really who's going to start where, but those are some names I'm really eyeing. This is obviously the biggest group to watch. Top 2 run defense each of the last 3 seasons. Should be no different here. But they do have an interesting matchup against a capable Oregon interior offensive line. So if they're not up for the challenge with some of these new guys, then they could be in trouble. I don't think that's the case one bit. But I do think that if they come out a little soft and a little slouchy, these younger guys, I think Oregon could have some success in the first half. Robert Beal, he's essentially a veteran at this point, had a TFL in 5 of the last 6 games last season. He stepped up in Adam Anderson's departure. Should lead the team in sacks this year. I like what they got at linebacker. It's interesting to see who's going to start. Xavier Sorley, Samel Munden in there, Johnson as well. So it's a very interesting group. Kind of curious to see what happens. I do think that Sorey, he might come off the edge a good bit in this contest. Munden, he's more of a pursuit guy, pretty athletic in coverage. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens with these young guys at linebacker. Nolan Smith, him and Beal, the 2 veterans, Carter as well. So I guess you got 3 veterans in this front 7. He's coming back to do wonders for his draft stock. He had a great first step, natural downhill pass rusher. Does most of his work from an athletic standpoint. Doesn't have power or length really, but I expect Smith to be a big contributor for this defense this season, and I want to see him work on some of those flaws. UGA does have some short-term questions, I think, on defense, but edge rushing, I think they're just going to be just fine. The defensive front as well, I think they'll eventually find their flow, and they'll just be dominating once again. A Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp led defense. They didn't face many tough passing attacks last year. Tennessee had a 200-plus yard wide. Alabama twice had their number. That's the whole reason I picked Bama to beat them in the SEC championship game. I thought when that defensive line got neutralized, their secondary would be in trouble. They weren't getting tested a whole lot. I think that's just not great for their development. Communication wasn't great at times. Covering the middle of the field was an issue. Outside wasn't a whole that bad, though. Keely Ringo, one of the top rising corners in college football, 205 pounds, great speed. He did have some issues versus the top 2 offenses he faced, but he did have bright spots as well, and of course sealed the deal with that pick 6 in the Natty. Tyke Smith was really good in the slot in 2020, only 2 games last year. They're very excited for his potential this year as he returns. Kamari Lassiter, Nyland Green, Dan Jackson at safety. He didn't do much in coverage, but he had 40 tackles. Those are 3 guys I'm really eyeing this year. William Poole as well. The secondary it's a talented group, but they have not proven a whole lot, so they're going to have to prove a lot in this contest. Very interested to see what happens here with Georgia's defense because, obviously they were almost nearly perfect last year outside of that blemish against Bama. But they really stepped it up in the Natty. And now they replaced a lot, so I think maybe early on they could be a little sluggish. But overall, this is a great unit. It's going to be one of the top defenses in college football. Comparisons, I think quarterback, the edge goes to Bo Nix. I just think he's a more talented player. Bennett, I think he's more of a product of his environment. Was very impressive in that 4th quarter against Bama. But other than that, for the most part, he's a pretty inconsistent player. I do think he's progressed a lot. Thought he was great in the playoffs as a whole, really, because against Michigan he was pretty solid as well. Bo Nix, I think he's the better talent. Bennett, just a product of the environment, really. The rest of the edges really go to Georgia. The running backs, I think they're pretty stout there. Milton and McIntosh. Pass catchers, they're pretty deep and versatile at both wide receiver and tight end. Offensive line, Oregon's not too far behind, I'd say, at pass catcher either. They got 3 very talented players as well, but they're not as deep as they once were. nowhere near as deep as Georgia either. Offensive line, give the edge to the Bulldogs, but I do like Forsyth, and I think Jones is a nice veteran for them as well. TJ Bass, they're got solid pieces on the offensive front, but they were just dominated last year by Utah, so capable unit, but they're not better than Georgia at this moment in time because Georgia was pretty sound last year despite having all that youth. They get a lot of guys back, and they're going to put some 5-stars into the lineup this year. Defensive line, unanimously, it's going to go to Georgia. I do like the Oregon interior D-line for the pass rush. It's kind of lacking. Linebacker, another group where Georgia's very talented. I think Oregon has the edge. That duo of Flo and Sewell is, I think, one of the nation's best. So it's going to be hard to give Georgia the edge there, even though at the end of the year that'll probably be much different. Secondary, I like the Oregon secondary as well, but I do give Georgia the edge just because overall they do not allow a whole lot. Even if they're not as tested as much, Oregon had their struggles in the back end last season, but they are full of playmakers. I like Bennett Williams. I think they got some interesting pieces that are going to be big-time contributors this year and in this game. But overall, I think Georgia has the edge in almost every single category. You can make a case for the ones they don't have an edge in. So Georgia, complete roster here. Great team. That leads us to my final thoughts on the prediction. Oregon, I think they need to just not get dominated in the trenches. Start there and see what happens because that was the problem against Utah last year. And those games were just boring to watch because they were just getting flat out decimated on both sides of the ball. And they got to find some pass rush on third down, which is going to be really tough because I don't know who's going to provide it. Maybe Muse Funa, Brady Swinson. Those are two guys I'm eyeing, of course. But other than that, who's going to show up? For UGA, contain Bo Nix because he's shown before what he can do when he gets outside of the pocket. And when he's playing with confidence, he's really tough to stop. This will be his fourth appearance against Georgia. And I think they got to stay ahead of the sticks as well. Just control the clock, get through this game. And I think that's what they do. I'm going to stay conservative. 35-17, conservative on both sides because I don't really know what to expect out of Oregon in the trenches because Dan Lanning, he's going to rejuvenate this team in terms of energy. Can he find some toughness in them as well? I think you'll see a little bit more than you did last year, that's for sure. But to the tune of winning this game, I don't know. I think 17, 18-point line, that's a little too much. I think Oregon will cover that. This is a talented team. It's got a lot of leftovers. I was pretty critical of this team early on in the offseason, but, as the months went on, I kind of realized this is a better team than I was giving them credit for. Georgia 35, I think they'll just be a pretty simple, balanced attack on offense. Defense will do their thing. But I'm going to go 35-17. I think this should be a pretty interesting game for the first half. I think the Georgia D-line will certainly struggle a little bit early on in this contest, and then that second half it's going to be a complete domination. I think they really start to find their edge. They'll make some adjustments, and these guys will get going in the second half, and that's going to be really the difference maker here. So expect a close first 30 minutes of ball. Bulldogs will control it. They're in Atlanta, the final 30. That's going to be it for everything from Atlanta. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.